By 2026, 70% of enterprises will be using service mesh in production environment to control service-to-service communication. This is up from less than 20% in 2022. My name is Paul Nashawaty. I'm the practice lead for the AppDev practice at theCUBE Research, and I'm joined by William from Buoyant. William, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and about Buoyant and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's William Morgan. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of a company called Buoyant. But we make a service mesh, which is, if you're in kind of the Kubernetes space, what we're most known for, called Linkerd. It was the very first service mesh that was ever invented. It was the project that coined the term, and the very first one to achieve the graduated status in the CNCF way back in the dark ages of 2021. And so pretty much everything we do today is all centered around how do we help organizations that are adopting Kubernetes, especially at large scale, especially in critical applications, take that platform and turn it into something that's truly reliable, that's truly secure, that can be observed, and can power their application and everything they need to do with it.
No, it's awesome. And there's a lot of conversations around service mesh. And as service mesh adoption continues to grow, and organizations are really looking to simplify service-to-service communication. And they're also looking to enforce zero trust security and gain observability across distributed systems, right? This is really where the power of a service mesh comes in. But I like what you mentioned. Linkerd is one of the earliest, most probably lightweight service meshes that's out there, right? And since it has been seen as increasing by enterprise traction due to its focus and simplicity and performance, as well as the recent enhancements such as GitOps workflows and Windows support. That was something else I think we should probably kind of talk a little bit about, because I think that really ties into the overall adoption of where things are going. And William, with that said, what do you see in the market regarding services and service meshes and the adoption? What do you see it going?
Yeah, so have been in the market longer than anyone else. We started, the very first version of Linkerd was out in 2016, so almost 10 years ago, and we've seen the entire kind of Kubernetes market especially evolve quite dramatically since then. A lot of the early adoption was people just trying to learn and understand and get their hands dirty, and then as the years have progressed, everything has matured. And the modern adoption that we see, which is very interesting from my perspective, is people getting really serious about Kubernetes as a platform. So I think there was definitely an initial wave of we're gonna try this out, or maybe we're gonna do it in one part of the organization or another one, and you'd have this kind of piecemeal approach. The modern set of people who are adopting Kubernetes, and as part of that, Linkerd and other parts of the stack, they really are doing it right. We're going to take a new start to this, and we're going to do it everywhere. We're going to build the proper platform, and as part of that, we need it, to have these guarantees. So we need it to be fast, we need it to be reliable, we need it to be scalable, we need it to be secure. All the things that we as platform owners are kind of offering to the developers. So, for example, multi-cluster is a big one. Part of our latest Linkerd 2.18 release was an enhancement to the way that we do multi-cluster communication. So Kubernetes itself, provides many things, but it doesn't provide a way of communicating between Kubernetes platforms. So since a long time ago, Linkerd has provided a way of facilitating that communication, so that in a way that's secure and that's reliable, and that the developers don't really have to know, which is what you want when you're building a platform. But what we've seen is that early multi-cluster adoption that we saw years ago was really one cluster, two clusters, kind of piecemeal. There's some modern adoption. We have customers who are thinking about hundreds or even thousands of clusters, and they're trying to come up with a really systematic approach to multi-cluster communication, where you can't just treat the clusters as pets, as we say. You have to treat the clusters themselves as cattle, as things that you kind of handle in aggregate amounts.
Yeah, I think that's actually, I love the analogy. I love the treat the clusters as cattle analogy. It really is true. They're not so much pets. They're really about functionality and making things work. But I want to take back a little bit of what you were saying and bring back to what I've been watching in the market, right? And what I'm hearing in the market is, I'm a proponent of service mesh. I think service meshes have a huge lift within the Kubernetes environment and with the application communication, and whether you're doing north, south, east, west traffic with API gateways or service meshes, it really does kind of add to the level of I'll call it success of your operational efficiencies across your clusters and such. But one of the things I'd like to ask you is, how do we debunk some of this noise out there that says that service meshes are too complex, they're too hard, they're too difficult for people to understand? And is the juice really worth the squeeze, right? Is it really worth doing all of this? Or is it not? Is it really just like, hey, we don't need a service mesh? And then the other second part of that, William, is which one? Do we have sidecarless, sidecars? Do we have, which way do we go? What's the thoughts?
Yeah. So I have a lot of opinions on this. I think in part because the kind of the defining characteristic of Linkerd versus the many other service meshes that are out there, many of which have come and gone, over the years, is our focus on simplicity, and that's been a part of almost every decision that we've made since the very beginning, from kind of the overall architecture. The cars versus other approaches, down to the implementation detail, where we are the only service mesh that uses. We build our own proxy. We build it in Rust. We call it a micro proxy because it does a fraction of what the kind of standard Envoy does. It has a much better security footprint. All those decisions have been focused around simplicity because the service mesh space is notorious, which I think you're kind of pointing out. It's notorious for its complexity, and I think that's unfortunate because the value that you get from it, can be so high that to have it marred by or tarnished by this kind of reputation for complexity, I think is it's unfortunate, and it does doesn't do any favors to the market as a whole. But part of that has been, what do we mean by simplicity? So what is it, or what's the opposite? What does it mean by complexity? I think for many people, what they're really talking when it comes to complexity is, how do I understand it? It's what we call operational complexity. It's when I'm running this thing, you can always install it easily, right? You can always press a button and a wizard happens and now it's installed, right? But the real trick is when I'm running this at scale, when I'm running this over sustained periods of time, is my service mesh now something that is causing more problems than it's worth? Is it something that I can understand, or is it something that I have to treat as a black box? Is it something that's observable and inspectable, or is it something that I don't really know what's happening and I just kind of like hope every day that it continues working to the next day, right? And there's so many aspects to that operational simplicity that it really requires a concerted effort. And I think the reason why the service mesh especially, is in a tricky spot, and this is part of why we've invested so much time and energy in Linkerd in focusing on operational simplicity, is that the service mesh sits at the intersection of the application and the network. And if any of those three things go wrong, or if any of those three things have an issue, then the service mesh is the one that kind of manifests the problem. It says, hey, I'm not able to communicate over here. And so the service mesh is kind of in the hot seat, in a lot of ways. So that means it's really, really important to make it observable and understandable and inspectable. Those are all key parts of what we call operational simplicity.
Yeah, and that's a very key point, right? Operational simplicity, the kind of the gatekeeper to where things are happening and how things are working. But I'll also introduce this, William. It's like when we look at cross-functional or cross-platform support, that becomes another area of challenging, right? So what we saw was the adoption of service meshes, much like most tech stacks, is like it happens in silos, right? A small part of the organization tries it, it seems to work, it's great, and then you start getting this, cross-cluster communication, that thing's working. But now we're looking at the growth and explosion of cross-platforms, and then also GitOps support, and that's shaping the future for services and service meshes. Enterprises are really starting to adopt this. What are your thoughts on how enterprises are going with this cross-platform and GitOps support, and how that's really helping elevate the relevance of service mesh?
Yeah, so one of the things we announced in our latest 2.18 release is early support for Windows. So I would classify it as experimental support for Windows. Still pretty early days, but that's an active area of focus for us. Just a few releases ago, we also added support for Linux VMs. So you can take those applications that are running on VMs or on bare metal, but often it's in VMs, and you can incorporate them into part of the mesh, even though they're not running on Kubernetes. That has been a big focus for us recently. It's what we call a mesh expansion, in part because of exactly what I was describing before, which is companies today, when they use Kubernetes and they're really betting on this being their kind of long-lasting platform, they are taking, as part of that, they're taking a very serious approach, and they're saying, okay, well, there's parts of this, of our existing tech stack that we're not actually going to be able to port to Kubernetes. So ROI isn't worth it because there's too much effort involved. So how do we incorporate that, into kind of this model that we want of our platform, where communication is secure by default, where communication is reliable by default, where it's observable by default. Those are all things that the service mesh gets you. Okay, what do we do with these applications that we know we can't bring into Kubernetes? And so a big focus, for us recently has been, okay, let's make the mesh expandable itself. Let's give you the ability to have those same core capabilities applied to workloads that are running on VMs or Windows machines or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think when we look at the enhancements that are coming in, like the recent announcements and the recent functionality that was been brought on to, Linkerd and with the new release, it also kind of amplifies where organizations are moving towards enterprise-focused service mesh. And what does this say to you about the tools that that are helping to evolve business requirements, right? These are new kind of approaches. Historically, it was kind of, I think you kind of even alluded to it. It's like experimental. It's kind of like we're trying things, but it's really now becoming mainstream in how it's being used. What are your thoughts on how this is evolving within enterprises?
Yeah, I think it's all about maturity. If you are an enterprise today, you're very familiar with the fact that technology goes through these cycles, right? And it's like the Gartner hype cycle or whatever it is, but things will come and go, right? And everyone was really excited about OpenStack and, like investing heavily in OpenStack, and then suddenly was moving on to Kubernetes. So I think there's a certain amount of this, which is before we really commit to something, especially something so fundamental as a platform, right? That's a big investment. Before we commit to that, let's make sure this thing is actually ready for action. Let's make sure it's not a flash in the pan. Let's make sure that, the next thing is not coming along that's just going to sweep that away. And I think the maturity of Kubernetes, which recently hit its 10-year mark, and continues to just be advancing, and, more and more kind of investment into the core Kubernetes platform itself, is paying dividends, and everyone is realizing, okay, this is going to be a long-term decision for us. The workloads we were running on Kubernetes 10 years ago, maybe we're not the same workloads that we're running today, right? Today we're running LLMs and all sorts of other exciting stuff, but the platform is there, and it continues to be not just to evolve, but to have a tremendous level of investment put into it.
Yeah, William, you kind of touched on something. I can't believe we went almost 13 minutes and not talked about some type of AI in this conversation.
Oh, I'm sorry to bring it up.
You did it, so we have to talk about it. And I do think it comes back to, I'm going to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about earlier, the growing emphasis of service mesh education. It really needs to be reflected on mainstream adoption and to kind of debunk the challenges with this ongoing complexity issue that organizations have, especially when we talk about new workloads like LLMs and AI. Right now we have LLMs that are distributed, and then you're going to need to have these applications talking amongst themselves, not within a specific organization, but also distributed among multi-cloud environments and such. That itself is complex. Right, but then to add in, the kind of the noise of, well, this is a way to solve the problem, but it's complex. We have to kind of come back to this, because I think the general message I'd like the audience to walk away from is, give it a shot if you're not already using it, because it will help with your organizational, communication for your applications, but it's not as complex as maybe it used to be back in the day. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And certainly Linkerd itself has gone through this long evolution where we started out, very kind of open source focused, and we continue to be open source, but most of our adopters were people kicking the tires and trying stuff out, and then they'd file bug reports and so on. And then over the years, we've evolved into an extremely customer focused project where the vast majority of our time and energy is working almost hand in hand with our customers who are deploying Linkerd at scale in these enterprise environments with all the complexities and intricacies and nuances and quirks thereof. And so we have this kind of feedback loop where we're taking everything that we're finding there, whether it's, we have customers today who are, doing very advanced things with LLMs, and we're learning a lot. I think they're learning a lot too from how to make that effective, all the way to customers who are doing extremely boring things with Windows, applications that were written 10 years ago that they've just given up on doing anything other than, kind of running as is. But all of that feedback, all of those experiences get funneled right back into the product, and the product improves every single day based on real life use cases. And to me, that is the key to making Linkerd successful, to continuing to make it successful.
Yeah, William, I agree. I think what I want to kind of leave the audience here with is, as I mentioned, I'm a proponent of service meshes. I've done a number of research notes on thecuberesearch.com. You can find these research notes. But, William, there's a lot here for the audience to unpack and to understand. This is just kind of a small little, conversation that we're having about this. Where would the audience go to learn more about what we've talked about?
Yeah, so the best place for me, in my perspective, is if you go to buoyant.io, which is Buoyant, you'll see a Get Started button, and you can download our full enterprise distribution of Linkerd, and you can start playing around with it immediately. So if you want to get your hands dirty, that's a very, very quick way of doing it. If you don't want to get your hands dirty quite yet, we have a whole host of educational material on there, starting from kind of self-paced courses to just recordings and webinars to white papers. So we've taken the approach of, we're just going to give you as much information as you can and allow you to to just navigate that at your own pace. And of course, if you want our assistance in kind of like going through the process of how do I acquire this in my organization and all that, well, we're very practiced at that. But step one is usually, let me learn about this. And so we've given you as much of that information as possible.
So yeah, so whether you're a practitioner or you're a buyer or decision maker, there's definitely resources available to understand, how to get more involved in this, why this would be, service mesh will be an impact to your organization. William, I want to thank you again for joining me today. This has been really great. I love the insights, love the opinion, your thoughts and share with us. I want to thank the audience, for all of you for tuning in. We do appreciate you being part of the AppDevANGLE community. But for now, this wraps up this episode, and we'll be back next Wednesday with another conversation driving into tools, trends, and talent shaping the future of application development. Whether you're deploying at the edge, building AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. So be sure to follow us on social. If you have any thoughts, questions, or just want to connect, you can always reach me at pauln@siliconangle.com. Until next time, stay curious and stay building.